I remember the way the phone vibrated on the kitchen counter that morning, a low, insistent buzz that cut through the quiet like a warning. I was standing by the window, watching the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel across the dew-soaked grass, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. The house was still, the kind of stillness that only comes after years of routine, after the children have grown, after the arguments have faded into silence, after you've learned to live with the small disappointments that settle into the corners of a marriage. I glanced at the screen, a number I didn't recognize, local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something, maybe boredom, maybe intuition, made me swipe to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice soft, cautious. There was a pause, then a woman's voice, bright and nervous. "Hi, babe. I just wanted to say I miss you already. Last night was, well, I can't stop thinking about it." For a moment, I thought she had the wrong number. I almost laughed, ready to tell her she made a mistake. But then I heard it, the way she said, "baby," the way her voice trembled with a kind of practiced intimacy. And in that instant, something inside me went cold. I didn't say my name. I didn't correct her. I just listened, my heart thudding in my chest as she filled the silence with words meant for someone else, for my husband. Normal life/setup. Before that call, my life was a series of gentle, predictable days. I'd been married to David for 23 years. We met in college, both of us too young and too certain that love would be enough to carry us through anything. We built a life together, 2 children, a modest house on a quiet street, Sunday dinners with his mother, vacations to the same beach every summer. David was a good man, or at least he had been. He worked hard, provided for us, remembered to bring me flowers on my birthday. He had a way of making everyone around him feel at ease. My friends adored him. My mother trusted him. Our children looked up to him. He was the kind of man who fixed leaky faucets and grilled steaks on the weekends, who kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, who never forgot to lock the door at night. Our children, Emily and Marcus, were grown now. Emily lived 2 states away, busy with her own family, and Marcus was finishing his last year of college. The house felt emptier these days, the echoes of their laughter replaced by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. I filled my days with small rituals, morning walks, tending to the garden, volunteering at the library. I baked bread on Thursdays, called my sister on Sundays, watched old movies when the loneliness crept in. David's job kept him busy. He worked in insurance, long hours at the office, business trips that took him out of town every few weeks. I never questioned it. I trusted him. Or maybe I just wanted to. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared history. We argued sometimes, about money, about his mother's meddling, about the way he left his socks on the floor, but we always found our way back to each other, or so I thought. That morning, as I stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, I realized how much I'd taken for granted, how much I'd chosen not to see. The woman on the other end of the line kept talking, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I know you have to go home to her, but I just wanted you to know. Last night meant everything to me. I can't wait until we can be together for real." I felt my breath catch. My hands shook and I set the mug down before I dropped it. I looked around the kitchen, the faded curtains, the stack of unpaid bills, the photo of our family on the fridge. Everything felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. I didn't respond. I let her talk, memorizing the sound of her voice, the way she said his name, David, softly, like a secret. When she finally paused, waiting for him to say something, I cleared my throat. "I have to go," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll call you later." She giggled. "Okay, babe, love you." I hung up. My hands were cold, my heart pounding so loudly I thought I might faint. I stared at the phone, at the number I didn't recognize, and felt the first crack in the foundation of my marriage. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I went about my day as if nothing had happened. I made the bed, watered the plants, folded the laundry. I told myself it was a mistake, a prank, a wrong number. But the truth gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. When David came home that evening, he kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, told me he'd had a long meeting. I watched him carefully, searching for signs, guilt, nervousness, anything out of the ordinary. But he was the same as always. Calm, charming, attentive. We ate dinner together, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from the garden. He told me about a new client, laughed at a joke I barely heard. I smiled, nodded, played my part. But inside, I was unraveling. That night, as he slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I listened to the rhythm of his breathing, the soft snore that used to comfort me. I wondered how long it had been going on. I wondered who she was. I wondered if he loved her. I wondered if he ever really loved me. The next morning, I woke before David. The sun was just beginning to filter through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the bedroom wall. I lay there for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of our home, the distant hum of the neighbor's lawnmower, the soft whir of the ceiling fan, David's steady breathing beside me. I turned to look at him. His face was relaxed, peaceful, the lines at the corners of his eyes softened by sleep. I tried to remember the last time I'd really looked at him, the last time I'd studied his face without the filter of routine or expectation. He looked older than I remembered, a little grayer at the temples, a little heavier around the jaw. But he was still the man I'd chosen all those years ago, or so I wanted to believe. He stirred, blinking awake. "Morning," he mumbled, reaching for my hand under the covers. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. He squeezed my fingers, then rolled out of bed, heading for the shower. I listened to the water running, the sound of him humming an old tune. I wondered if he was thinking of her. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. David came into the kitchen, freshly showered, smelling of soap and aftershave. He kissed my cheek, thanked me for breakfast, and sat down at the table with the newspaper. I watched him over the rim of my mug, searching for something, anything, that would give him away. But he was the same as always, calm, unbothered. I felt a wave of frustration, then guilt. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it really was a wrong number. But then, as I cleared the dishes, I saw his phone on the counter. He'd left it unlocked, the screen still lit up with a text notification. I glanced at it, my heart pounding. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. Love you." No name, just a heart emoji. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't help myself. I scrolled up, reading the thread, short, flirty messages, late-night calls, plans to meet. My stomach twisted. David came back into the kitchen, and I quickly set the phone down, pretending to wipe the counter. He didn't notice. He grabbed his keys, kissed me goodbye, and left for work. I stood there, alone in the kitchen, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but instead I just stood there, numb. The days that followed blurred together. I went through the motions, grocery shopping, laundry, phone calls with Emily and Marcus. I smiled when I needed to, laughed at the right moments, kept up the appearance of normalcy. But inside, I was unraveling. I started paying closer attention to David. The way he lingered over his phone, the way he smiled at messages he wouldn't share, the way he suddenly had more late meetings and urgent deadlines. I noticed the new shirt he bought, the cologne he started wearing, the way he checked his reflection before leaving the house. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things, but the evidence kept piling up, receipts for dinners I hadn't cooked, unexplained charges on our credit card, the faint scent of perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found a lipstick stain on the collar of his shirt. It was a shade I'd never worn, too bold, too young for me. I held the shirt in my hands, staring at the mark, feeling a mix of anger and humiliation. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but I was afraid. Afraid of what he'd say, afraid of what it would mean for our family, for the life we'd built together. So I kept quiet, waiting for the right moment, hopping for a sign. A week later, the phone rang again. Same number. I hesitated, my heart racing, then answered. "Hey, babe," the woman said, her voice warm and familiar. "I just wanted to check in. Are we still on for Friday?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Of course, I said, mimicking the tone I'd heard her use. Same place. She laughed. You know it, I can't wait to see you. I miss you. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my breathing even. I miss you too. She sighed, a soft, contented sound. I wish you didn't have to go home to her. I wish you could just stay with me. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice calm. Soon, I said. Soon. She giggled. Okay, babe, I'll see you Friday. I hung up, my hands shaking. I stared at the phone, at the number that had become a symbol of everything I'd lost. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth. That night, as David slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the woman on the phone, about the messages, the lipstick, the lies. I thought about our children, about the life we'd built, about the years I'd given to this marriage. I knew what I had to do. I had to find out who she was. I had to know how deep the betrayal went. I promised myself I wouldn't let him see me break. The next morning, I woke with a plan. I waited until David left for work, his usual peck on my cheek, his briefcase in hand, his smile as practiced as ever. I watched him pull out of the driveway, the taillights of his car disappearing down our quiet street. Only then did I let myself exhale. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone in front of me, the number still saved in my call log. My hands trembled as I scrolled through David's contacts, searching for anything that might match. Nothing. I checked his recent calls, his messages, his emails. He was careful, too careful. There were no names, no photos, just a string of numbers and coded messages. I thought about calling the number back, about pretending to be him, about luring her out into the open. But I hesitated. I didn't want to become someone I was. I didn't want to stoop to their level. Instead, I decided to wait. Friday, she'd said. Same place. I had no idea where that was, but I was determined to find out. That afternoon, I called Emily. I needed to hear her voice, to remind myself that not everything in my life was a lie. Hi, Mom, she answered, her voice bright and familiar. How are you? I'm okay, I lied. Just wanted to check in. How's the baby? She laughed. Teething. I haven't slept in 3 days. I smiled, picturing her in her tiny apartment, juggling motherhood and work and all the chaos that comes with it. You're doing great, Em. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Mom. Are you sure you're okay? You sound tired. I hesitated. I wanted to tell her everything, to spill the truth and let her hold some of the weight. But I couldn't. Not yet. Just a long week, I said. I'll be fine. We talked for a while. About the baby, about Marcus's graduation, about the weather. When we hung up, I felt a little lighter, a little less alone. Friday came faster than I expected. David was in a hurry that morning, fussing with his tie, checking his watch, barely touching his breakfast. Big meeting, I asked, keeping my tone casual. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. Yeah, might run late tonight, don't wait up. I watched him leave, my heart pounding. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my purse and keys. I followed him, keeping a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. He drove across town, taking back roads, doubling back once as if he suspected he was being followed. I kept my distance, my breath shallow, my mind racing. Finally, he pulled into the parking lot of a small Italian restaurant on the edge of town. I parked a few spaces away, my heart hammering in my chest. I watched as he got out of the car, checked his reflection in the window, and walked inside. I waited, counting the minutes, watching the door. After a few moments, a woman appeared. She was younger than me, maybe 10 years younger, with long, dark hair and a bright red coat. She smiled when she saw David, her whole face lighting up. He hugged her, kissed her cheek, led her inside. I felt sick. I wanted to run, to scream, to storm inside and confront them both. But I stayed in the car, frozen, watching as they laughed and talked and touched each other like lovers. I sat there for nearly an hour, watching them through the window, my heart breaking with every passing minute. When they finally left, I ducked down, hiding behind the dashboard as they walked to her car. He kissed her, really kissed her, then watched as she drove away. He stood there for a moment, looking after her, then got into his own car and drove off. I waited until he was gone, then started my car and drove home, the tears finally spilling over. I sobbed the whole way, my hands shaking, my vision blurred. I felt betrayed, humiliated, foolish. But I also felt something else, a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. I wasn't going to let him walk away without consequences. That night, David came home late, just as he'd said he would. He smelled of wine and expensive cologne, his tie loosened, his eyes bright. "Long day," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. I nodded, my face calm, my voice steady. "Did you close the deal?" He smiled, the same charming smile he'd used on me for years. "Yeah, it went well." I watched him, searching for any sign of guilt, any crack in his facade. But he was as smooth as ever. We went through the motions, dinner, small talk, the evening news. I pretended everything was normal, but inside I was planning my next move. The next morning, I waited until David was in the shower. I took his phone from the nightstand, my hands steady now, my mind clear. I scrolled through his messages, looking for the number, the woman, the proof. I found it, a string of texts, photos, plans. I took screenshots, emailed them to myself, saved them in a folder labeled Truth. I put the phone back, careful to leave everything as I'd found it. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I had the proof. I had the truth. Now I had to decide what to do with it. I spent the next few days in a fog, moving through the house like a ghost. I went through the motions, laundry, groceries, phone calls with Marcus about his final exams. But my mind was always elsewhere, circling the same questions. How long had it been going on? Did he ever love me? Was it my fault? I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I'd missed. The late nights, the sudden business trips, the way he'd started locking his phone. I remembered the times I'd asked if something was wrong, the way he'd brushed me off with a smile and a kiss on the forehead. I wondered if he'd ever felt guilty, or if he'd just gotten better at lying. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't angry at myself. I was angry at him. Angry for the lies, the betrayal, the way he'd made me doubt my own instincts. Angry for the years I'd spent building a life with someone who could throw it all away for a few stolen moments with another woman. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I needed answers. I needed closure. And I needed him to know that I knew. That Friday, I waited until David came home from work. He was in a good mood, humming as he changed out of his suit, asking if I wanted to order takeout for dinner. I watched him move around the kitchen, so familiar and yet suddenly so foreign. When he sat down at the table, I slid my phone across to him. The screen was open to the folder I'd created, screenshots of his messages, photos of him with her, the call log from the number that had become all too familiar. He stared at the screen, his face draining of color. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he looked up at me, his eyes wide, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Where did you get this?" he finally whispered. I kept my voice calm, steady. "She called me by accident, twice. I played along, I listened, I watched. I know everything, David." He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I waited, my heart pounding, my hands clenched in my lap. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice muffled. "I never meant for you to find out. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you did it anyway. How long, David? How long has this been going on?" He looked up, tears in his eyes. "Almost a year." A year, 12 months of lies, of sneaking around, of pretending everything was fine. I felt the anger rise in me, hot and sharp. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Was I not enough for you? Was our life not enough?" He shook his head, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "It wasn't you," he said. "It was me. I felt old, invisible. She made me feel young again, alive." I stared at him, the man I'd loved for more than 2 decades, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I stood up, my legs trembling. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "I need time to think, to breathe." He nodded, wiping his eyes. He packed a bag, moving through the house like a stranger. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway, looking back at me. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I never stopped loving you." I didn't answer. I watched him go, the door closing softly behind him. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the house eerily quiet. I thought about calling Emily, about telling her everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to process it on my own. I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and let myself cry. I cried for the life I'd lost, for the trust that had been broken, for the woman I used to be. But as the tears dried, I felt something else, a sense of relief. The truth was out. The pretending was over. I could finally start to heal. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window. The house felt different, emptier, but also lighter. I made myself breakfast, sat at the kitchen table, and started a list of things I needed to do. Call a lawyer, change the locks, tell the kids. I wasn't sure what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and awkward silences. David moved into a small apartment across town. He called a few times, left voicemails I didn't return. I needed space, and I needed him to feel the weight of what he'd done. I told Emily and Marcus the truth, or at least as much as I could bear to say. Emily cried, her voice trembling through the phone. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come home?" I told her no, that I needed to handle this myself, but her concern wrapped around me like a blanket. Marcus was quieter, angry in a way only sons can be when their fathers fall from grace. "He's an idiot," he said, his voice tight. "You deserve better, Mom." Word spread quickly, as it always does in small towns. At the grocery store, I felt eyes on me, some sympathetic, some curious, a few judgmental. Friends called, neighbors dropped off casseroles, and my sister drove in from 2 hours away just to sit with me on the porch, holding my hand in silence. David's mother called, her voice brittle. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I never thought he'd do something like this." I could hear the shame in her words, the disappointment. I told her it wasn't her fault, that sometimes people make choices we can't understand. At church, the whispers followed me down the aisle. I held my head high, refusing to let their pity or gossip define me. I found comfort in the familiar rituals, the hymns, the prayers, the quiet moments of reflection. I prayed for strength, for clarity, for the courage to move forward. Meanwhile, David's world began to unravel. His affair became public knowledge. The woman, her name was Rachel, I learned, wasn't as discreet as he'd hoped. She showed up at his office one afternoon, demanding he leave me for her. His boss found out, and suddenly those urgent deadlines dried up. He was passed over for a promotion, his reputation tarnished. Rachel, it turned out, wasn't interested in being a secret anymore. She called me once, her voice sharp and defensive. "You should have seen this coming," she said. "He was never happy with you." I listened, letting her words wash over me, and then I hung up. I refused to let her have the last word. David tried to fix things, tried to apologize, tried to make amends. He sent flowers, letters, even showed up at the house once, standing on the porch with tears in his eyes. I didn't let him in. I needed boundaries. I needed to protect what was left of myself. Hardest part was facing the memories. Every room in the house held echoes of our life together. The dent in the hallway from when we moved in, the faded paint in the kitchen from Emily's first art project, the worn spot on the couch where David used to sit and read the paper. I let myself grieve, let myself feel the loss, but I also started to reclaim those spaces. I painted the kitchen a new color, rearranged the furniture, donated old clothes and mementos that no longer brought me joy. I found solace in small things, morning walks, fresh flowers on the table, the laughter of my grandchildren over the phone. I started volunteering more at the library, losing myself in the quiet order of books and the gentle company of people who didn't know my story. Slowly, the pain dulled. The anger faded. In its place, I found a quiet strength I didn't know I had. One afternoon, I ran into David at the grocery store. He looked tired, older, the weight of his choices etched into his face. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hi," he said, his voice tentative. "Hi, David," I replied, keeping my tone even. He hesitated, searching for words. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, for everything. I know I can't fix it, but I wish I could. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace. I know. I hope you find what you're looking for. He looked down, his shoulders slumping. Take care of yourself, okay? I will, I said, and I meant it. As I walked away, I felt lighter. The past was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt open, uncertain, but full of possibility. The weeks turned into months. The seasons shifted, and with them, so did I. There were days when the loneliness pressed in, heavy and cold. But there were also days when I felt a quiet joy in the simplest things: a warm cup of tea, the sun on my face, the sound of rain tapping against the window. I learned to enjoy my own company again. I started reading novels I'd always meant to, letting the stories carry me away. I took up gardening with new purpose, coaxing life from the soil, watching as tiny green shoots pushed through the earth. There was something healing in the rhythm of it, the patience it required, the hope it inspired. Emily visited with her family, filling the house with laughter and the sweet chaos of children. Marcus came home for a weekend, helping me fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom, his presence a comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. We talked late into the night, not about David, but about life, about dreams, about the future. I started to see a counselor, someone who listened without judgment, who helped me untangle the knots of guilt and anger and grief. She reminded me that healing wasn't a straight line, that it was okay to have setbacks, to feel sad, to miss what once was, even if it was broken. I forgave David in my own way, not for him, but for myself. I let go of the bitterness, the need for answers I'd never get. I realized that his choices were his own, that they didn't define my worth or my future. I wished him well quietly, and then I moved on. I found new routines, new joys. I joined a book club, made new friends, started volunteering at the community center. I learned to cook for one, to savor the quiet evenings, to find peace in solitude. There were moments when the pain returned, a song on the radio, a familiar scent, a memory that caught me off guard. But each time it hurt a little less. Each time I reminded myself of how far I'd come. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily called. Her voice was warm, full of love. Mom, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you think. I smiled, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. I'm proud of you too. After we hung up, I sat in the fading light, listening to the crickets, feeling the gentle breeze on my skin. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who answered the phone that morning, who believed her life was set, her marriage unshakable. I thought about the woman I was now, wiser, stronger, softer in some ways, harder in others. I realized I wasn't broken. I was changed, and that was okay. I started writing in a journal, capturing the small victories, the moments of gratitude, the lessons learned. I wrote about forgiveness, about letting go, about finding beauty in the unexpected. I wrote about hope. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting or pretending it never happened. It was about accepting the truth, honoring the pain, and choosing to move forward anyway. I chose myself. I chose peace. Sometimes, life hands us a story we never wanted to live. A story of betrayal, heartbreak, and starting over when we thought we were too old, or too tired, or too set in our ways to begin again. I never imagined I'd be the woman who answered a call from her husband's mistress, or the woman who had to piece herself back together after the truth shattered everything she thought she knew. But here I am, and if you're listening to this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of loneliness, the slow, stubborn hope that healing is possible. If so, I want you to know, you are not alone. You are stronger than you think. And sometimes the hardest endings are just the beginning of something new. Would you have played along the way I did? Or would you have confronted the truth right away? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Thank you for listening and for being part of this community. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember you are worthy of love, no matter what.